Warning! This tutorial doesn't contain the following information. How to download Minecraft, how to download Blockbench, how to open .minecraft, how to install Forge/Fabric, how to install mods, how to use text editor, how to read, how to use Brain. So, this is part 2 of the tutorial, I guess, covering very important stuff like the assets folder and what you can do with it. So I don't think this intro needs to be any longer, so just let's begin. Okay, so we are now in .minecraft add-on packs, our pack folder, our assets folder, and our namespace folder. Here we can create a new folder, like so, and we can name it textures. Like so. We can enter this folder, and here we can create folders, but we don't have to. You can do that to organize your stuff better. For example, now I want to show you how to add a new icon. So I will name this folder icons. And here is where I can save a file that's a texture, so something from a graphics program. This is paint.net, and here we will create a texture, something to use for our superpower. You can draw whatever you like, whatever fits your power, of course. I will do something very simple because that's just an example. And the resolution here is 16 by 16. That's because I want to stick to normal Minecraft resolutions. That's the resolution blocks have. Oh, that's not symmetrical. Yeah, now it is. And I think keeping it 16 by 16 makes it just fit into Minecraft better. So now that we have a texture, we have to save it. And of course it needs to be saved inside of our pack and our assets textures folder, and it needs to be PNG. Of course our name must be all lowercase letters, otherwise you can run into issues. So now we are moving into the data folder again to edit our superpower to use this icon. Okay, so we are inside of our superpower, and now what we need is to change the icon, which now is a Minecraft stick, but we want it to be our namespace and our texture, so our namespace in this pack is, and then we type in textures slash, and now the folder we place it in, so icons, and I named my file icons.png, so it's icon.png. I will double check if that's correct. Icons, icon png. Yeah, that's correct. And it also is the same way for powers, so I'm not going to use a different texture because this is a tutorial and I don't want to bother making another icon just for this. But you can do it also on abilities to have custom textures. You can also type in item names if that's something that you want to use instead of textures. So yeah, we now load into our game with our power, and now as you can see our ability has this icon and our power also has this icon. Now a very important topic: speedster trails. Speedster trails are part of course, the assets folder. And you can find more information about those on the wiki under rendering and trails. Trails are placed inside of assets, your namespace, Palladium, trails, and just any name with lowercase letters without special characters and all that stuff. If you are looking for more information about how to create trails, you have the trails.html file, which is in mods documentation Palladium. And of course you need to add it to your power to actually work, so you need a trail ability, and this is how you use that ability. So now let's look at the HTML file and what information we can get from there. So inside of trails.html we have a couple of different options for trails. Of course we have the most popular one, the lightning trail, a gradient trail, an after image trail, and what is a compound trail? It allows you it's here. It allows you to basically have multiple trails inside of one power, inside of one trail file. And it works like so. You have a trail setup like this, and inside of those square brackets you can put other trails in. So now we should get back to Visual Studio and start making a trail. So we have a file like this with our compound trail, and inside of it I already copied from that file a lightning trail, and we can experiment a little bit with the values that this trail has. For example, I don't think I want to have I want to change this option, and I don't think it's required. I also don't think that I want to change those options, but I want to increase the lifetime. I will leave the core color alone, but I will include a different color for glow. You can just get this color from any kind of graphics program. Most have a option to select a color and then get the hexadecimal value from it. And this is something you can try to enable or disable and see if you like this. And I will also get rid of those. Bloom, you will see that trails have that kind of glowing thing, and you can customize how many layers of glow you will have. So let's say we want 4 layers. Size, I think 1 will be enough. This is something that is described on this file as something you need if you want to make your core or glow black. And then there's rotation and rotation speed. I think this is only really useful for beam renderers, which will be something that we will do shortly. But we have a lightning trail, and since it's a compound trail, that means that I can add another. I want this to also use an after image trail, and I want this trail to be blue to stand out. I want it to mimic the player, I think. And also to have a shorter lifetime, so I will leave it at 20. And I will pretty much leave everything as it is by default. So now let's check. No. What we need now is the ability, which we can find on the wiki. I will swiftly search it up. And Rails, yeah. You can also find it in abilities.html if you want. So this is my trail, and my namespace, and then my trail. Now we can load our game to check if this ability works and if my trail loads. This is us in game with our power loaded. So if we start running now or walking, because we didn't add a running condition to it or anything like that, we can see that our trail works. And you can see that the lightning has layers of glow, and it's a little bit big. I highly recommend for you to experiment with values that are in that file, so you can find a trail that looks the way you want it to look. You also can see that we have a nice after image, which is us but blue. So the next thing we will be looking at is a gradient trail, and then we will move on to energy beams. This is a gradient trail. This is a trail that just copied from the trails.html file. Nothing really that special about it. I didn't edit even the color, because I just wanted to show how it looks like. A lot of people use this type of trail on flying characters, and I think this can look very good if you pick the right color. So yeah, this is a gradient trail. Very cool. We will get back to Visual Studio in a moment, but first of all, I added an ability off screen, because I am pretty sure everybody knows how to add an ability at this point, but we will get back to Visual Studio in a moment. What I added is an energy beam ability. As you can see, you probably tried that yourself or already, and something that you notice is that using it doesn't seem to do anything until you point it at a mob and you realize that it actually does something. What's going on? Why is there no visible beam? That's because you are missing a beam renderer. So now it's time for me in this video to show you what a beam renderer is, how to use it, how to make your beam for your character. This is our superpower again, and this is our beam power. This is something that I took from abilities.html, and as you can see we have energy beam. This refers to a beam renderer file, which we will look at in a second. Damage type, that's something if you make custom data pack driven damage types for your pack, but normally it will just make it so it just will be a player attack. So if you are into making custom damage types, you could make a custom one for a custom death message. We have damage, which is obvious. Max distance, which is the max distance the beam will have. The speed, which is the speed at which it will reach its max distance. Set fire seconds, we will make it 3 seconds of fire, I guess. Cause fire, it's something that can be true or false, so I will set it to true. And smelt blocks to true. You can disable this if you want to have a beam that isn't fiery, but is something like a freeze beam or something like that, or an energy beam that wouldn't smelt anything. I added a condition so this beam isn't always enabled, and now we should look at the beam renderer, which is something like this. First of all, you have to specify a body part. This is the body part this beam will be attached to. I picked the head, but it can be anything like left arm or body or even legs. We also have a glow color, which is similar to what Trails had. Actually, Trails and energy beams have pretty much the same settings. We have also rotation speed, core and glow opacity, and we have something that I don't think Trails have, which is offset. This is something used if you have it attached to your body and you want it to be in a different position. For example, I will type 4 in here, or let's make it 8, and this is something that you will have to get used to. And you can reload your power, so it isn't that bad. You can reload Trails, which would make it a lot easier to adjust those values. Next up we have particles, which are particles that will be placed when the beam hits something. So we have an example particle, which is Minecraft effect. That's the particle from when you drink a potion, the amount of particles and their motion, which is both of those are something that you need to experiment with to get familiar with. I don't have the knowledge to explain what those options do exactly. Actually, you should always experiment with values like that. With anything that has to do with Addonpacking, you should experiment. So now we are in Minecraft and we can test our energy beam, like so. And it also does set on fire, and it also smelts blocks, just like expected. So yeah, it also causes particles, but that's not even the coolest thing that beams can do, because you can also have lightning beams. How would I do that, you ask? I will show you. Okay, so basically all you need to do to make a lightning beam is to just type and then Palladium lightning, just like you do for Trails. No other trail type will work. Like if you want a after image beam, that's not gonna work. And also a gradient beam also doesn't exist. But a lightning beam exists. So that's very cool, I think. And you can experiment a lot with values to get different kinds of lightnings or different kinds of beams. Like if you make the if you add more segments to this, and if you make the spread of the segments not as much as this, then what you will get is just a unstable beam. Not one of those regular straight beams like the beam we saw before. But of course you can also increase the spread to make a different kind of lightning beam, if that's what you're looking for, if that's what you want from your beams. And now we are talking particle emitters. This is the Palladium particles ability, which you can find on abilities.html, and this is how it looks like if you just copy exactly how it is in that file. We don't want to change the icon, and so we can delete that and it will be a blaze rod. We don't need a title or a bar color. We also don't want to change the hidden properties or a list index or description, GUI position, whatever. So we can just get rid of that. After that we have particle type, which you can just put in any particle, like smoke for example. Then you have options. This is for particles like dust, to change its color or whatever other options a particle may have. Then you have emitter, and here I will put the emitter that I prepared earlier off screen, so our namespace, and I called mine particles. Okay, so this is the superpower part done. Now we can move on to the particle emitter. This is a particle emitter file. It's located in assets, namespace, Palladium, particle emitters, and it's a JSON file. In it, you can specify a body part, for example head, the amount of particles that will appear every tick, and the offset, which is kind of the position where particles appear at, but it's relative to the position of this body part. Then you have offset random, which will make it so particles won't appear in one exact spot, but kind of in an area around that point. Then you have motion and motion random, which is something I would encourage you to experiment with, to find something that fits kind of the particles you want to have. Visible in first person is self-explanatory, and of course a very important question to ask would be how to add multiple particle emitters inside of one file, and you do that with square brackets like so, and then you can just have another particle emitter inside. The sad thing about this is that you can't specify different particles for those two particle emitters if they are in one file, but at least you have different positions where particles appear at. For example, now it's the left arm and offset is set to -12, and I think this will make the particles appear at the player's hand. And it's also visible in first person. I wanted to just show how different it will look like compared to not visible in first person. So now let's go into the game and see how it looks like. Okay, we are in Minecraft. Now let's add our power, which is this. And as you can see, we have particles here, but not in front of our view. But if we go inside of third person, we can see particles from our hand, from our left hand. Skin customization, we'll set our hand to left. We can see particles starting to appear in kind of different places based on how the hand is rotating, and also from our head, but they disappear the second we go back into first person. So here we have another cool Addonpack feature called dynamic textures. You add dynamic textures in Palladium dynamic textures, and then you name a JSON file. Why should you use a dynamic texture? Because dynamic textures can change based on different kind of, I don't want to call them conditions, but different, how the wiki calls it, variables and transformers. We will cover transformers in the render layer part of the video because they are mostly used there, not in dynamic textures, but you should know that if you need to, you can use texture transformers also inside of dynamic textures. So right now we have a file that looks like this, and we have the icon we made earlier, and that's not really dynamic, is it? That's because to make it dynamic we need variables. Like so, we have a variable section here, and then we need to grab a example variable from mods documentation, Palladium, dynamic texture variables. Okay, so this is just copied from the file directly, and we also need to give it a name. This is crouching, so I will name it like this. And what's happening here? So we created a variable, named it sneak, and it holds a value from a variable that's called crouching, Palladium crouching, and it can have a true value or a false value because you can be either crouching or not crouching. But what's the meaning of this true and this false right here? You can actually use any sort of value you put in here inside of this path to the texture. So you can have different textures based on what's going on here. So what I mean is that I will set up my texture like this. So what will happen when we use this texture somewhere? What will happen is that if the value is false, the game... Oh, I forgot to add it here. Yeah. So what's happening here is when I'm sneaking, when I'm not sneaking, not crouching, not doing anything, then this variable will have the value of this, nothing, no text, no nothing. So the base texture will be textures icons icon.png, because this and this hashtag is very important. That's how you make it obvious to the game that this is a variable. But it's hashtag sneak, and because sneak is nothing, no text, no nothing, just empty space, then the game will treat it as icon.png. But if we do sneak, it will treat it as icon_sad.png. And I made that texture in advance, not just a texture I'm sure you can manage to make it texture yourself. And we will use it now on our superpower. So to make the game take our dynamic texture, we cannot say like use icon.png or use icon hashtag sneak. We can't do that because sneak only exists in this file. So if we want to use a dynamic texture, there's a thing built into add-ons that lets you just say hashtag your namespace and then the name of your dynamic texture file. Without .json. That's not necessary. And now what we have here is an ability with a dynamic texture. So next step is to actually go in game and see how it looks like. Okay, so quickly in game, as we can see, we have our ability bar, and if we sneak, it changes. Sneaking, not sneaking, sneaking, not sneaking. Very cool. Okay, so this is another part of this video. This time it's all about render layers. Render layers allow you to use custom models in game, so they are very useful. So first what we need is a model. And the model we created must be a bedrock entity model or a geckolib model, but that's from a plugin, and that's something that I will show you maybe in another tutorial because it's kind of complicated and I would like to show stuff like animations for it, but I don't think that I should add more things to this tutorial to make it even longer. So yeah, bedrock entity, and then you have UV mode, and you have box UV or per face UV. Box UV is something that's used in entities, for example, because it's bedrock entity, and per face UV lets you kind of just select the face and drag the texture however you want to fit that face of a cube. But yeah, box UV just you will see when we make this model. Now, when you make a model, the most important thing that you should always remember to include is something that's named a group here. You need to have a group for all those different parts. That's kind of something that is necessary, otherwise your model won't load. I grabbed one of my models and I deleted all the cubes because I wanted to have an empty model. So that's why I kind of have different positions here for stuff, because it was a player model. So in those groups you can place different kind of cubes, and this will, the group they are in will affect how they behave in game, because they will rotate kind of with the body part that has the same name as the group. So head and hat will move when you rotate your camera, when you move your head and stuff like that. Body will move only when the body is moving, and then you have arms. So when you're walking, your arms will move, those cubes will also move, and stuff like that for the legs also. So let's create a model. Let's start with a cube, just like that, and maybe resize it. I think something like that. Then again, maybe not, maybe something like that. That's the example model. And the next step is to add a texture. I don't want to make it complicated, so I have just one cube. So we create a texture. We can texture template. Okay, it's all right. 32 by 32. Okay, that's kind of a lot of empty space. I don't like that, but it has to be a multiple of 2. So we export our model, and I place it always inside of namespace Palladium model layers, and then I name it. I give it a name and make it a .json file. Then we have our texture, which we will not save yet because we need to make it look kind of cool, I guess. So our very epic texture must be created. Very interesting blockbench gameplay right here. And then we can kind of just add a pattern so it doesn't feel empty and kind of like a solid texture, but it's still an example texture. Nothing really fancy about it. Just kind of random pixels everywhere. We made some kind of weird cube. Kind of something, I don't know what it is, but it's there. And then we save our file somewhere. I save it into textures, and then I don't know, some kind of folder. I named it cube, and I named my file base.png. So that's the blockbench part of the tutorial out of the way. I kind of put a little too much effort into making this texture, but now we will put it in our game to see how it looks like. Okay, so next up what we have is the render layer file. That's a JSON file placed at Palladium render layers, and then it's a JSON file. This is a very basic render layer. basically what we have here is a model, and it's the model we saved, so it's in Palladium model layers folder, and it's a bedrock entity model. That's just its name. You don't need to put .json after it. And we also have our texture, which we made in Blockbench and then saved. So this is the path to this texture. Now that this render layer is done, we can use it in a superpower, like so. This is an ability, render layer, our namespace, and then we put the name of the JSON file inside of render layers folder. I named my file render player. So now here is the render layer being used. And now if we go and see in game, we will see that it works perfectly fine. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, go. We have our model loaded right here. It's in some kind of weird spot, but because everything in assets can be reloaded by pressing F3 and T, I have a mod that disables the loading screen so it doesn't pause my game. But normally you have the Mojang logo covering everything. But yeah, it's placed like that. If you want to change it, you can reload it without closing the game and change your model to whatever you would like to see. We are back in Blockbench for, I think, the last part of this tutorial. Because I don't want it to be very long. It already is like 40 minutes or so. So what we have here is our cube, and now will be our introduction to alpha masks. If you don't know what that is, that's basically Iron Man nanotech. That's what most people think when they hear alpha masks. So I will show you how it's done, because it's not just a lot of textures that are created to look like an animation. No, it actually is automated. So you need just a texture of something, and an alpha mask is put on top of that. So let's start by making some kind of a new texture. I will call it mask 1, mask 0. Never mind. And it's just a copy of our weird cube. I also moved it because I want it to be more visible in third person. So basically, an alpha mask. In alpha masks, you use two colors, white and black, and you can also use different shades of gray. But basically, how it works is that everything that's white will not be visible at all. That's just a white texture. And everything that's black will be visible. And we are naming it with numbers. That's kind of like frames of an animation. Right? This will move. So is frame 1. That's when it starts happening. Then we need something that's here. I already did most of the stuff inside of my files, my superpowers and everything earlier. So I'm checking if I'm doing it correctly or if I would have to re-record this section. But it seems like I'm doing everything right, so let's continue. I think it's super hard to make alpha mask you are happy with. There's just a lot that you can think about, a lot that you can change when you make alpha masks. And you also have to experiment with stuff like duration, but duration means more frames, and more frames means making more textures like this. So maybe that's not something you want to do, and you need to just find a good set of frames. So I made it with 4 ticks for different textures in mind. I think this will be good enough. Now that it's all black, that means that the entire texture, the entire model will appear on screen. So now we actually need to add that functionality into our game, into our render layer. So let's look at Visual Studio again. So this is my power, and what we need is an animation timer. That's an ability that I took from abilities.html, and it holds some kind of number value that increases when it's enabled and decreases once it's disabled. And I have hidden in bar set to false because by default it's set to true, which means it wouldn't appear in the ability bar. So this condition would actually be useless because I wouldn't have any keybind to enable it. So I had to set it to false. Start value is 0, so it has a value of exactly 0. But when enabled, it will go up to 4, and it will increase 1 every tick. We also need something in our render layer, which is a transformer. And that's something you can use on dynamic textures, but I didn't show it in this tutorial. I don't know if I ever will. And it's called an alpha mask. So you have a mask, and it's just a regular path to a texture, but it also uses a variable here. And this variable is also taken from dynamic texture variables. So if you don't know where I get this from, it's from the same thing that I showed sneaking, that I copied sneaking from. And then, very important, I didn't mention this, textures now has a bracket like that that closes here. Then it's base and our texture, transformers. Transformers is just this, just the fact that we use an alpha mask, and the path to this alpha masks, it uses a variable. Under this, you declare your variables. We have an output field, and it's our namespace textures, and very important, uh, this file path doesn't have to be a real folder that exists, but it's really important that it's something uh, that wouldn't overwrite your existing textures. So keep that in mind, that this path is not real, it doesn't exist, so don't overwrite your stuff. And next up, what you should remember is to always include the variable you used for the alpha mask. It's very important, because if you don't, it will always be just it will just generate one texture, which most of the time would be a fully transparent one. Okay, so we loaded in game, and there is no weird cube to be seen or anything like that, because of how the alpha mask works. Oh, I also fly. That's something that I use the attribute command for. Attribute. Uh, I think it's flight speed. And now I'm not flying anymore. Not important. Normally you use attribute modifiers for that. Anyways, let's enable our animation timer. And as you can see, the weird cube appears like that, and it follows the pattern of this black and white texture we used before. Also, this is not directly in front of my face. I use free cam mode, so you can see that it's quite far away from my face. So yeah, this is probably the most useful feature inside of render layers. It's something that people really like to use, not only for Iron Man, but for all sorts of things. So, another tutorial is over. This one was a long one, and I'm planning to do more. Something about add-ons folder, something about asking for help. But for now, I think this is enough. If I missed anything, let me know in the comments below, and I would address it in the next video. But for now, I think that was it. Goodbye.